Yeah. A disciple is somebody who's decided to follow a discipline. So I've decided to follow Jesus. And it means, amongst some other things that it means, is I've decided to discipline my life and my character according to following Jesus. So it's going to involve me making decisions, because you can't be a disciple or under any discipline without making some decisions. You need to make a decision to follow Jesus. And when you've made a decision to follow Jesus, there will be various kind of decisions that you have to make after that. What am I going to do about this now that I'm a disciple of Jesus? What would Jesus want me to do, etc. Jesus would want me to set this right so that it comes up, but it's not. We're not having the connection we should have between me and you. Can you perhaps follow the thing along or something? Thanks for problem solving. Yeah. Coming to the hand. Thank you for noticing the hand. Yeah. That's great. Discipleship. So stick with it, Carol. I'm coming to the hand any moment now. Right. So a disciple is somebody who's decided to place themselves under the disciplines of Jesus. Now, I don't know about how that works for you. For me, that means we're going to argue a lot. It means that the will of Jesus and the will of Chris are not identical. Right? So it means I have to say, well, I know that Jesus wants me to be like this, but I'm not like this. I'm like that. And that means I have to discipline myself to change. That's my decision, to follow Jesus. Otherwise, I'm just following Chris. And that isn't very successful, I found. And following Jesus works better. So there's this business of making decisions. But have you noticed, it's one thing to make a decision in your head or your heart. It's quite another to live it out, isn't it? Yeah? It's very easy often to make it in your head and your heart, but rather difficult to live it in your hands, right? In your actions. So, back to your question, Carol. There's a picture of a head, a heart, and a hand, right? And all it's referring to is actually something Jesus said. In Jesus' culture, what we call head and heart kind of go together as heart. Just so as you know. A heart was the symbol for how you feel about things and the decision-making stuff as well. So, but we tend to talk about head and heart separately and hands. Okay. Jesus said a very interesting thing that I've mentioned before, but I don't mind mentioning it again. I'll mention it again and again, actually. He said two things about this head, heart, and hands business. Right? First thing that he said was that, out of the heart, the person acts and speaks. I'm kind of interpreting what he said rather than going to the exact text. Okay? So he said if you put what's inside a person right, if you get the head and the heart right, then what comes out through their hands, their actions, will become right. And that makes sense, doesn't it? If your motives are good, the way you're thinking is good, if your heart's in the right place and your head is thinking well, then you're going to take good actions. Yeah? So it makes sense. And to understand, therefore, as a disciple, I need my head and my heart to be under the discipline of Jesus, learning to follow him, so that what I do with my actions will match what's in my head and my heart. It'll be the fruit of my head and heart coming out through my hands. Is that okay? He said something else too. He said, don't invest yourself in the things you're going to lose. In this life, said there's moths, and there's rust, and there's death, and you can't take it with you. So it's quite possible for us to, in fact we do it all the time, over-invest in things that don't actually finally matter. that actually you can be the wealthiest person in the world and you don't have anything ultimately. Yeah? Or you can be the poorest person in the world and ultimately end up with everything. Because you can't take it with you. Just don't make the mistake of just investing yourself, your time, your money, your energy, your effort, your thinking, your feelings, in the things that don't matter that much. Instead, he said, invest your effort, your sense of what's important, your actions. Invest yourself in the things of the kingdom of God. Because you do take those with you. Invest in what lasts. Invest in what really matters. He said, because I tell you this, where your investment is, your heart will follow. That's an interesting way around, you see. There's the way round of get your head and your heart right, your hands will start behaving well. But this is the other side of that equation. It says, but use decisions to act well with your hands, and it will teach your head and your heart. Because you'll act according to what you've decided to do. And your head and your heart will be educated by the doing of good actions. So we need to be concentrating on both. Getting the heart and head right so that the hands do the good stuff. Disciplining ourselves to do the good stuff with our hands so that our hearts and heads start to own that investment. Here's an idea. Let's imagine I'll give you £50,000 as you go out. If you want it, by the way, mention it as you're leaving. Okay? You say, yeah, I could do with that 50 grand. So I say, okay, here's 50 grand. And so, well, what are you going to do with it? Oh, I don't know. But my friend wants to buy a house in Stockmore, and I think I'll go into partnership with that. Put 50 grand into the purchase of that house. If I say to you, which house? Oh, I don't know yet. I haven't been there. Okay. What do you like about it? Oh, it's a good place to invest right now, and so forth. Something will change once you pass that 50 grand over for that house. You'll go and look at that house, even if you've never looked at it properly before. You'll follow what happens to that house with great care. Your head and your heart will belong to that house in a new way because you've just put 50 grand in it. Right? Your heart will follow your investment. So don't wait to feel like doing the right thing, says Jesus. Do it. As a matter of discipleship, do the right thing. And in the doing, your head and your heart will be doing some learning. An example of this is my great New Testament hero, second in my opinion, only, by the way, if you want to read about that, what Jesus said about that, go to Matthew 6 and the areas around that. My hero, Joseph, well, can we go on to the next slide? Joseph isn't how you will mostly hear of him. He's only called Joseph once in the book of Acts, which is where he mostly shows up in the letters of Paul as well, but mostly in the Acts of the Apostles. You find about Joseph. Joseph, in the very earliest days of the very first church on planet Earth, Joseph made a decision to invest in the church. He had a field. So Joseph went and he sold his field. He collected the money and he brought it to the apostles at the time, Peter, Andrew, James, John, those guys. And he gave it to them. He said, this used to be my field, but it is now funds for our church. And he made a switch, you see. He had personal ownership of his field. But he decided that a better investment for that money was for we, the church, not me, Joseph. It's a very interesting piece of self-discipline. I don't suppose that was particularly easy. It may have been easy, I don't know. But I know that for me, that would have been a lot of self-discipline involved in that transaction, right? And he gave it to the church, okay? In which case, he took his hands off the power. He said, well, now the church will decide what to do with that money. I used to decide what to do with it, but my last decision with that money was to give it to the church, of which I'm a part, but now everybody has a share in deciding where it goes, or the apostles do, or whatever. So that's what he did. The people of the church were so excited by this gift and by some other characteristics of Joseph that they renamed him, gave him a nickname in the church by which he is still known. Encouragement's son. Goes easier as son of encouragement. Or in Aramaic Hebrew of the time, tortured into a sort of English pronunciation, Barnabas. Son of encouragement. It means this person is so good for us to have around that it's like he's inherited his whole characteristic from encouragement. It's like he's encouragement's son. It's like it's in his DNA. He's just like his dad, encouragement. And throughout the book of Acts, you can find little references to Barnabas, or Barnabas, as we would call him, and his ways of encouraging other people. And he saw the importance, can we go on, of belonging, and he showed what belonging meant to him. I belong to the church, he said, and it matters so much to me that my belonging that I choose to sell my field and give the money to my church, and so on. By the way, I'm not out for you to go sell your fields. I'm just saying what Joseph did and how it led to him getting a nickname, or perhaps technically the first Christian name ever given. I'm not sure. But they gave him this nickname, Son of Encouragement. In our reading, he shows up in a really interesting way. Because he knew how much it mattered to him to belong to the church, and that it was important that people belonged to the church, it mattered to him that the new guy, Saul, who everybody didn't want in the church, should belong as well. It mattered to him. He understood something about belonging. So what we learn in the passage, of course, you'll remember probably what happened just before it. Saul had gone to Damascus to persecute the church. Jesus had met him on the road, and the risen Christ appeared to him and commissioned him instead of trying to close the church down and destroy it, to plant new churches and build it up. Was to be his ministry. So Jesus turned Saul completely around and said, instead of destroying my church, your job is going to be to build it up. And so we came in on that in the reading. And for that reason, it's very easy to understand why Peter and James and Andrew and John and all the others were scared when this man showed up in Jerusalem to join the church, and they would have nothing to do with him. Barnabas was a man who saw possibilities, not just problems. And that's the way he looked at people, and it's the way he looked at Saul. Others were scared of him because he had earned a reputation for hurting people. Right? But Barnabas stood up for Paul and helped him join the church. I wonder what would have happened if Barnabas hadn't done that, and if the apostles had fenced Paul out of the church. Paul planted almost every single church that gave rise to the church around the Mediterranean basin, that ultimately gave rise to the northward movement of Christianity, landing eventually in Bridgewater and other places too, of course. Yeah. Paul's part in the history of the church is like nobody else's. An incredible role that he played. I guess if Barnabas hadn't seen the possibilities more than the problem in Paul, I guess God would have found somebody else instead of Barnabas. But then Barnabas would have missed that incredible privilege of being the person who stood up for the man nobody else wanted, until they learned to value him and want him. Barnabas, the son of encouragement, helped Paul to belong to the church, and the rest is history. Can we go on to the next slide, please? Yeah. So the first message, if you like, from this that I would want us to get is that when we look at other people who do not yet belong to following Jesus as a disciple, belong to the church, then what matters is that we see their potential with God, not only, because we may have to look at some real problems. Problems are real, right? Don't pretend there are no problems. But to see the potential more than we see the problem, and to decide that God's potential is what we're interested in. And that's very important with us looking at around at our community and at other people who might be interested in following Jesus. We really want other people to follow Jesus. Yeah? Do you know what? We don't need to grow this church. You understand that, don't you? We don't need any more members for this church. Right? That's fine. Why would we need more members? We don't need any more. That's not the reason for sharing the gospel with anybody, is to grow the church. Right? If this church can close, say, I'm not saying it's going to next week, but what if, we don't recruit any new members to Westfield Church, and in 10, 20 years' time, we end up closing it down or something. That doesn't matter, provided the gospel of Jesus continues to be shared with people and the church finds new forms, does it? This isn't supposed to stay forever. We are not to stay forever. What we need to know is, what is supposed to stay? Right? What's supposed to stay? Not the current version of the Bible that we use, but the Bible needs to stay. Not the songs that we sing, but worship needs to be around. Yeah? Etc., etc. We need to understand the difference between what matters and must stay through every generation and what just belongs to our time. And it'll pass away as we go, and that doesn't matter at all. That's fine. What matters is that people need Jesus. That's what matters. God wouldn't have sent Jesus if people didn't need Jesus, right? People need Jesus. So our business is nothing to do with growing the church. It's to do with sharing Jesus with people so that they can have the option of making an informed decision whether to follow Jesus and be his disciple, like we are, or not. So that's the task. And Barnabas gives me a real heads up on the approach to that, which is stop seeing the problem, focus on the potential, what God can do with somebody. So I wanted to suggest to you that, in conclusion, that you need to help me and people like me belong to the church. Right? We need to help one another belong. We need to help others to belong. Jesus had a way of talking about stumbling blocks. And he said, you know what? Don't put a stumbling block in anybody's way. Do you want to click it on a bit for me, Robert, please? Thanks. Yeah? So don't let there be obstacles to other people finding out about Jesus. Do you know what the church is really good at? Not saying us necessarily, though I'm sure we're good at it too. The church as a whole is really good at hiding Jesus so that people can't spot him. We're very good at smothering the appearance of Jesus with our overlay of religion. But you can't share Jesus that way. You've got to let Jesus be seen for who Jesus is. Right? So we must make sure, not just that we keep ourselves a happy group of disciples following Jesus together, but that this group of disciples makes Jesus known to people, makes Jesus evident to people, makes the love of God revealed to people, so that people can begin to make decisions about him. We need to be active and deliberate in encouraging people to belong to Jesus. I do not mean, when I say that, please go out on the street now and interrupt strangers and say, are you saved? That's not what I mean. No, if you feel led to do that, go in peace and serve the Lord. But that's not what I'm particularly referring to. To the decision to actively enable other people to find out about Jesus, to discover him for themselves, and decide whether they want to be disciples along with us, and whether this is the particular fellowship for them to do it with, etc. That's what I'm talking about. Making Jesus evident to people, and making it possible, even encouraging them to take discipleship steps and consider. That's part of our job, isn't it? And we need to do that for each other, and we need to do that for other people. So I think during the next few months, Advent, and then into the new year when we're looking in next year at following the way of Jesus Christ, that we should be very deliberately, as a church, beginning to say, how do we make it difficult? How would we make it easier? How can the voice of Jesus be heard in our communities? How can people who don't yet hear the call of Jesus to follow him hear that call so that they can make a decision whether to or not, and so on? And I don't think, some of that will be about how you talk the gospel to people, but most of it won't be. It'll be about how you and I, for who God has made us and called us to be, function as real personalities. We all have different ways of belonging, you see. Are you the quiet belonger? Some people, when they go to belong to something, like to sit quietly for a bit until they find their feet. Other people, the first day they're part of a group, they're right in the center, the life and soul of the party, and so on, aren't they? Which are you? Probably neither quite. Yeah, well, most of us somewhere in the middle, aren't we? Which are we? All have different ways of belonging. And so all those people who live in this area around us, who have not yet heard a viable invitation to follow Jesus, they'll have different ways of belonging too. And the whole way of belonging to the church is going to change anyway. We know that. So what matters is that we're really looking at Jesus, working out how to follow him, and making sure that other people meet the real Jesus through us and have the opportunity to hear his call to follow and be disciples too. The footnote to that call that I'm making this morning is twofold. One is, don't only help me begin to belong, help me to grow once I've started belonging. Help me to belong better than I do now. We can help each other. Do you realize that? You are now helping other people belong to the church just by showing up today. Thank you for that. You're already helping the people sitting around you to belong, just because you came. Right? And you can help them even more by giving them a shy little smile before they go home after church. That's all. That'll go a long way sometimes if you're lonely, or if today's a bad day for you, or you're struggling with your faith, or with sorrow, or with illness, or with something or other, and somebody just goes, "Oh, hi, nice to see you. Have a biscuit," or something like that. That can go a long way. But there's lots more than that as well, isn't there? So it's lots of millions of little things that we do for each other to help each other feel the belonging of this family. And there's some big things too. Field selling and stuff comes into it as well. But it's the little things and it's the big things. Don't forget the little things, right? Help one another to love being this. Love being us. Yeah? And then let's help others. And let's help one another to grow and become better disciples than we are yet. We can do that too. All of us can help each other to grow as disciples. And my last one is, I said there were two aspects to it, is I'm a human being. So here's what I know. Life will have some unkind moments waiting for me. Right? So I'm happy enough today. Here I am, big smile. Right? Cheesy smile from Chris for you today. Right? But next week I might be broken by something. I might be hurting. I might be ill. I might be in grief. I might be struggling with my faith. I might be lots of things by this time next week. I might get up on Sunday morning and go, do you know what? I just not. This can't be part of it. They'll want me to be cheerful, or they'll want me to. I'm just not. I'm fed up with it. Anyway, I don't like Rachel, and David's annoyed me a lot. And I'm not going. I'm not having any more to do with it, and so forth. And then I'll need you then, because I've run out of resources of my belonging at that point, and I'll need you to help me know, Chris, you still belong. You're still part of us. And how do we help you work through the fact that you don't want to right now, and so forth? Help me stay belonging as well. But it all starts, of course, with help me to belong in the first place. We don't need a bigger church, but there are tens of thousands of people within our circle of reach who do need Jesus. And our task is to encourage one another and others in following him. Amen.